Welcome back to the BS Machine. You are listening to episode number 54 with your host, Tommy Kendi. And this is going to be a episode where we discuss a very relevant issue for the times at the moment, which is around forgiveness or unforgiveness. And I think this is a really relevant conversation to be had at the moment because when shit is getting real and shit's hitting the fan, which it is around the world at the moment, there's a lot of conflicting ideas and conflicts and whatnot that are definitely happening around the world, and not just within your intimate and personal relationships with loved ones and family and stuff like that, but also certain people have different thoughts and you just go into this fucking place of conflict. And I know a lot of people that have fallen out, look, friendships and relationships and whatnot. So I think this will really hit home with a lot of people. And there's basically, we're looking at two different ways of being. One is being unforgiving and the other one is being forgiving, being able to forgive or not forgive, basically. And many people that I know, including a bunch of my clients, not a bunch of them, but there is a few of my clients that I've known that have been very fucking unforgiving, and not just in their personal relationships, but with different viewpoints on things sort of floating around in the world at the moment. And when you become unforgiving, what I find is that a lot of people that are unforgiving, they put a label on themselves, and they have this sort of blurb that they spit out, which is basically, I've always been very unforgiving, that's just how I am. And so, to me, that is a very interesting label to put on yourself, because it is, and I've heard it a number of times where people say that, and it's almost like they're cementing their view of the world. They're cementing their way of being, but they're also cementing a really strong and judgmental viewpoint that doesn't really give them a way out. So what I wanted to explore today is this idea around, from a totally unbiased place, this idea of what it is that the certain viewpoints that people have that are unforgiving, and the viewpoints that people that have that are forgiving, and how that might relate with you, and maybe you'll learn some things from this podcast, because I guess for myself, I've always been quite a forgiving person. And that is a label, I guess, that I do put on myself, but I'm not too stringent on it, because there has been situations for me where I have been totally unforgiving, and certain things would have had to have happened, or certain things have to happen in order for me to forgive the situation or forgive the person. So we all fall into that little thing where we just take things really personally when things become that they get to a point where you can't forgive a situation, or you can't forgive people. So really, I mean, it's probably a good start, isn't it, in terms of taking things too personally, because I unforgiving people that I know, they really do things that they take things, not even things, they take life way too personally, especially when shit doesn't go their way. And so basically, when you're being super unforgiving, especially after a situation has happened or some sort of conflict has happened, and you take life way too seriously, and things don't go your way, then basically, from an outsider looking in, what's really going on there is they're assuming that they've been singled out somehow for for the bad behavior of others, or they've had like a random misfortune. So people that are unforgiving, they believe that they're alone, and that there's something unique about their situation when no one else has suffered what they've had to suffer. And it's really the genesis of unforgiveness. Taking life too seriously is this. It's like that's the genesis. That's a starting point where everything follows on from taking life too personally and being unforgiving. So people are unforgiving. They just straight away assume the absolute worst about the person or the situation, that the person that hurt you, or the situation that's fucked you over. It's like they must have done this to me on purpose, or they must have meant to hurt me in this way. And so they label them almost as a villain, and they label them as almost like a scheming fucking villain. But what they're also doing is, if they're labeling someone as a villain, or as someone that meant to hurt them that way, they're also labeling themselves as a victim. And so they're blaming this person or this situation for their distress, and almost it's like they're almost demanding that that this person should be punished for it. So by demanding that they be punished for it, they ignore or dismiss any alternative explanation, or they dismiss and ignore any type of alternate scenario that could come out of it. And they also, they ignore any role or choice that they might have played in contributing to the outcome. And that is a bad one, and this is, I'm just putting out onto the, I'm putting it out there, simply unforgiving people, and how they are, because this is just how it is, isn't it? And so when you're so unforgiving and you're labeling yourself as unforgiving, you're usually blaming the other person for the distress. And then they even take it further, where this is can be in quite quite full-on situations. So I'm going to the tip of the iceberg, where it's like you're fucking pissed off, some shit's happened and it hasn't gone your way. This is unforgiving people. And so what they do after all this, after they've blamed the person, that they've assumed that the worst about this personal situation, where they must have fucking hurt them. And so what they do is they actually start fantasizing about how they can revenge this person or this situation. And so they actually start to believe in their mind that these bad things were never supposed to happen in the first place. And where this sort of leads to is, it leads to an awareness that that if you are, how do I say this, that it leads many of them to an awareness of your vulnerability that they find hard to accept. So they feel ashamed of being vulnerable, and angry at the person or the situation for exposing these vulnerabilities. And this can, this might sound a bit harsh, but this is basically what happens. And then from then, they actually go to this place after fantasizing about how they can revenge this person or punish this person. They go into like dwelling excessively on the losses that they've incurred through this process. And they sort of dismiss all the good things in their lives, and they focus all their things on the losses they've incurred. And it's almost like they forget about their true outcome and their true and authentic outcome, and they stop working towards those outcomes that they actually want, because they're excessively talking and constantly going on about what they've lost, what they've endured, and all that type of stuff. And it sounds fucking harsh, man, but that's what it is. And it almost becomes to this thing where it turns into a sense of like helplessness, where that bleeds over into their thoughts about the future, and they just keep going down this dirty fucking yuck road, where there's just no end in sight of anything having to work. And you can see where I'm taking this, because it's becoming, it becomes heavy. And me even talking about this stuff, it sounds fucking dirty and yuck. And so they they're very reluctant to do work on their belief systems, or shifting anything, or changing anything, to maybe shift them over towards, actually going towards their hopes and their goals. And they basically avoid the people or the situations that they're angry with, as a way to basically set boundaries for themselves. And basically because, they just don't know how to set the boundaries for themselves more directly. And what they would usually do, really unforgiving people that are quite unaware, is they would usually resolve the conflict or the situation by either ending, if it's a relationship, they would resolve it by ending the relationship, or removing them from the situation. And depending on the situation, obviously there's some, really shit things people can do. And that is that, you have to see the situation, like obviously if there's someone's done some really fucked up stuff that is just not okay. Well, yeah, obviously you have to resolve that by getting yourself out of that situation, and or ending the relationship. Like, it's obvious if someone's being, doing some shit stuff like violence, whether it's physical, mental, whatever, any type of abuse, all those things, like anything around that, like you'd be getting out of there quick smart. It's not a place for you to forgive that person. That's a different level of forgiveness, where you would do that after the fact, and take take your own journey towards healing and forgiveness with that. I'm also talking about things other than abusive relationships, or things like that. So when you when you resolve the conflict by ending the relationship, you're or ending or removing yourself from the situation, you're not really allowing healing to happen. So now that I've gone into how unforgiving people usually act, or what they do, let's have a look at more people that are forgiving, and how they look at the world, and how they might go into certain things. And I've actually taken a few notes here, because I really wanted to do this podcast from a place of non-bias, where I'm not judging anyone. I'm just basically getting out some stuff on how unforgiving people are and how forgiving people are. And so people that are forgiving, it's almost like the opposite of each one, where they try not to take life personally. So they accept that life can be unpredictable and won't always go their way, but their attitude is, it's not all about me. And what they basically do is, when shit things happen, when fuck things happen, either through someone acting in a shit way, or we assume it to be shit, or we land in situations, what people do that are forgiving is they remind themselves that they're not alone. Now, it doesn't matter how big or small the loss is. They understand, forgiving people understand, that many others have experienced the same thing. So that they're not saying that their pain is fucking real. Like, they feel the same pain, but that pain doesn't make them any special. They understand that every human being has suffered, and some have intensely fucking suffered. A lot of human beings. I mean, you read the Viktor Frankl book on, when he was in the concentration camps. I mean, fuck, man, just even putting one little thought into what those people in concentration camps have gone through is just, or even child smugglers, those poor kids, and fuck, man, there's so many things that have happened in the world where human beings have immensely fucking suffered. So people that are forgiving, they understand that their own pain is real, but it doesn't define them. It does not make them special. And to move on from that, they basically assume, they don't try and leap to any sort of judgment. They basically just assume that most people mean no harm. they assume that people are powerful, and that they understand that they have way more in common with the other person that what that may not that they have way more in common with the other person than what they would usually know about. So, for example, if shit goes bad and something happens, whether it's a he or she or whatever, and it's in a relationship, the guy might say, hey, you know what? I can see she might have thought that was the only choice she had, or she maybe says, I can see how, he might have thought that was the only choice he had. And so they sort of realize they don't know the whole story, and the other person's perspective is for sure worth understanding, or is for sure worth diving into to see what's going on. And so, they ultimately take responsibility for their own experience. They know that they alone control how they respond to these situations or these people. And they, that Viktor Frankl book, who wrote what's the book called? Viktor Frankl. I don't know, just Google Viktor Frankl, the book's there. He wrote this epic book about being in the concentration camp, and there was this actual quote in that book which I just pulled out, which was unbelievable, where he says, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. So they basically acknowledge that they have sensitivities and triggers like everyone else. So they determine whether their feelings really fit this situation and whether they have any accountability for how things have happened. So they take responsibility for their own experience, regardless of how tiny or how big the misfortune or misforgivings have been. So people that are forgiving, they fucking take responsibility for what they contributed to the outcome, the choices they would have made, and maybe the words they would have said. So it's a big one. Taking accountability and responsibility for people that are forgiving is a huge one. And they basically, I said before, it's like they still feel pain, but they just don't label themselves, or they don't define themselves with the pain. So they shift their focus to the things that actually matter and what they can still be thankful for. And it's almost like they celebrate the good things, the good things that they can remember from the past, and the good things that are possible to happen in the future. This is big, because once you learn how to shift your focus, shift your perspective, fucking hell, man, everything changes. And obviously, a lot of people know that I'm a avid yoga practitioner. And one of the things that one of my first teachers said back in the day is spend 5 minutes a day upside down in an inversion, whether it's a headstand, whether it's a really simple one, having legs up against the wall, whatever it is, but just spend 5 minutes a day with your heart above your head, and your perspective on the world, your perspective on life will drastically shift really, really quickly. That is a big one. It's like you've got to find ways of shifting your focus, shifting your perspective, because if you don't, you're just going to be going around and round in the same fucking circles constantly. And basically, people that are forgiving, they try for reconciliation. They remain open to exploring positive shifts and changes, and that is also a big one. If you're stuck, like the unforgiving people, if you're stuck in the mindset of only focusing on all the things that you've been fucked over by, then it's going to be hard for you to see any form of reconciliation, or see any form of way of moving forward. And so, I mean, now I am going to step into a judgy, comparison mode, because we've explored in detail both the unforgiving people and the people that are forgiving. And so I think in those situations, when I was speaking about the people that are unforgiving, it feels fucking heavy, and I'm sure you would have heard that as well as I was talking through it. It feels heavy. It feels yuck. It feels like you don't really want to have that. And that heaviness, that feeling of having a heaviness when you're unforgiving, some people are fucking addicted to that feeling. And I get that, because it's a sore point, and it sometimes feels so much safer to be unforgiving. It feels like you're protecting yourself, because you're holding, and when you're being unforgiving, you're not really open to vulnerability. And if you've done any sort of work on yourself, even the tiniest of work on yourself, you will know that sometimes, well, not sometimes, 99.999% of the time, you will, when you're in a place of vulnerability, and when you're in a place of I wouldn't call it weakness, but vulnerability, where you're letting your guard down, that is usually when the most powerful things and the powerful shifts can happen. And within conflicts, there has to be this element of vulnerability to you. And the more you try and hold on to your labels, and the more you try and hold on to the way that you must stick to your fucking thing and hold on to that thing of, well, I'm unforgiving, I've always been like that, and no. You don't really have much chance, to be honest, of enjoying a powerful relationship, because things always happen. Situations happen, fucking things happen in relationships, things happen in life, and you've got to learn how to take responsibility for those things and put into practice, or become aware of how you added to those outcomes. So and the other thing is, which I think is a big one, which is, holding up a mirror to the situation or the person. And what you'll find is that when you really look a little bit deeper into it, into this idea of whether you're forgiving or not forgiving, if you have your stance and you stand strong in your stance, then even if you remove yourself or resolve the situation by removing yourself from it, without any healing, or without any opportunity for vulnerability or reconciliation, you will create the same shit again until you learn the fucking story, or until you learn the lesson. And that just is what it is. And if you look back over your life, you'll see certain patterns that kept coming up for you, whether it's the same arguments, the same conflicts. And the only time that stopped happening for you was when you realized that you are the creator of that experience in some way, shape, or form. You added to that conflict, or you added to that situation. You took responsibility for it, didn't you? You took responsibility, and you took the responsibility back onto yourself. And then when you take the responsibility, when you take accountability for all this stuff, and you get out of your fucking judgment, then you will see everything in perspective. You will shift your focus onto the things that actually matter. You will shift your focus into the things that matter. And what are those things that matter? The things that matter are really the emotions of love, the emotions of connection, the feeling of fucking having the courage to step into vulnerability and let all that magic bubble up in you through vulnerability. There's just so much in this, but one of the key things I think about this podcast, to really have a think about, or to mull over, is how it felt when I was talking about being unforgiving. That feeling of heaviness and yuck, it just doesn't feel good, does it? But that feeling of being able to forgive, that's light. But it's light in a way where it's a vulnerable lightness. And when you can forgive and shed all those things you're holding on to, everything will fucking open up for you. And what you'll also find is that even in those moments that when you're holding on to this thing of unforgiveness and you're holding on to this story, well, that I'm just unforgiving, you might even find that you're holding on to this story, but at the same time, all your greatest wishes and desires are actually unfolding right in front of your eyes. And without even noticing it, you're not even in conflict anymore. You're not even in a fucking argument anymore. You're in none of that. You've basically met the perfect outcome where you're just fucking experiencing a great level of joy, a great level of love, great level of connection. But then, do you just remind yourself of like, oh fuck, well, I'm really unforgiving, so I've got to go back to being pissed off, or I've got to go back to being unforgiving. You know, that's well, actually, you know what? Who am I to say? That's for you guys, the listeners, to hold on to. So, as a I guess as a completion to this podcast, it's I felt like it was a nice and quick one, but as a completion to this podcast, take a look in your own backyard and ask yourself whether you define yourself by the emotions that you are feeling. Because you know, ask yourself if are you unforgiving or are you forgiving? And either whatever one you fall into, if you're experiencing any form of conflict at the moment, have you actually been able to step outside the box? And have you actually been able to define yourself as forgiving simply for the purpose of allowing vulnerability to pop up in you? Can you really do that? Can you put yourself into a place of forgiveness? And can you look at the situation? Can you look at the person and have the courage to stop assuming and just, well, not stop assuming. No, my bad. And with this situation or the person, actually assume that this person or this situation, or the people involved in it are fucking powerful people. Assume that they are wanting to shift to maybe the same thing that you're wanting as well, which is love, affection, connection, intimacy, whatever it might be. And if you can do that, if you can step into this place of just assuming that the person or the situation is actually powerful, and that you've created this situation to up level yourself or upskill yourself, so that you can actually have all the things that you dreamed of. You can actually have all the things that you wished for, and so that's really where it is. And if you want to, you know, hit me up with any questions on forgiveness or unforgiveness or anything else, any other comments you've got, feel free to hit me up on any of my social media stuff on Instagram, Tommy Kendi, or wherever. You know where I am. You've been listeners. And if this is the first episode you've heard of the BS Machine, fucking welcome. I love you. I love seeing these numbers grow each and every week. And so thank you guys. I think you're all epic, and I fucking love you. And my challenge to you this week is fantasize about you being the greatest version of who you are. And whatever you see in that fantasy, live it out. Thank you. Hasta la vista. Love your guts, you fucking legends.